I am delighted to be here. I work at the International Trade Center. I have the best but potentially most difficult job, I think, at ITC, which is overseeing our work in sustainable development and in inclusiveness, and specifically in she-trade. So I was delighted to see the last panel. We haven't done quite as well with gender balance on this panel, but we're continuing to do our best. What I want to do today, we're going to be a little bit shorter than we had expected. We're going to try to stay on time. So we're going to start off with a short question to each of our panelists, come back with maybe one more short one, and we're going to open it up to you in the audience. So we, as Adrienne has said, think of some good challenging questions for our people here. Just to set the stage, this panel is called Green Means Business. It's about how business is responding to the demand for more sustainable trade. And what we're going to do is explore a little bit from the standpoint of both companies we have here, the finance, and from the standpoint of the public sector. We'll try to look at it from all those angles, and we also have an analytical angle for us to help set the context. I'm going to throw out a couple of things also contextually from my work. The first is when we talk about green, we're talking about a broader definition of green. It's not just simply environmental sustainability, we're talking also about social sustainability. So a broader definition, that's what we see also in industry. The second is, we think, but I want to hear from all of you, that the business case for going sustainable has already been demonstrated in many ways. Creates more customer engagement, that it reduces cost, that it ensures supply, and so on. I want to hear also from you all about whether what we're hearing in our work is true. Third, sustainability is coming towards the mainstream, but is it really there yet? So some of our ITC research indicates in some commodities we're getting towards maybe a quarter of trade is sustainable, maybe a third, but that's one of the things we're going to be exploring here. The last bit, and this is maybe close to ITC's heart, but I think to all of us, sustainability is driven in many cases by standards. A lot of our work is trying to help companies understand standards. But these are very difficult, especially for SMEs. So we want to also explore not just how business is responding, but how this affects both large and small businesses. So we've got a really good panel. Looking forward to hearing from all of you. I'm going to do very short introductions, so I encourage you, if you want to add to it, to pull out more important details. And I think we should jump right into the introductions and the panel. To my immediate left, there's Tancred Voiturier. He's from the Institute for Sustainable Development and International Relations in France, and his research looks at the effect of trade on sustainable development. So he's going to be setting the stage for us. Next to speak will be Mr. Chen Xiaoping of Everbright International in China, and he's going to talk to us about two things. Everbright is an environmental services company, essentially, but also he is working with the UNECE on waste to energy, so he's going to talk about that business model. We then have Marcel Vernooy, who's a strategic advisor and part of the management team at the Sustainable Economic Development Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. And Marcel's going to be talking about the work they do in promoting sustainable trade and sustainable development worldwide, and why that's a priority, and what the role of the public sector is. Then we have another private sector representative, that's Martin Cañeres, who's managing director and one of the founders of Biopolis, which is a company here in Hungary working on circular economy solutions. Very interesting, innovative business models there. And last but not least, we've got Brindusa Burrows, who's the CEO and founder of the Ground Up project in Switzerland. Ground Up is a platform for sourcing deals in environmental impact, but also along with it, there's a Ground Up Foundation. And Brindusa, you can tell us more about that. So let me start off with you, Tancred. Set the stage for us a little bit. How much has business done to get us towards our targets of sustainability and towards a low carbon economy?
Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much. And as a transition with the previous panel, just to say and support the call from Arantxa, that to really help women entrepreneurs, and if we want to have green women entrepreneurs, we need that the washing, the homework, the nappies, the cooking is taken care of by the brothers and by the husbands. Otherwise, there won't be green women entrepreneurs. So that's my call to start with. But my takeaway point on this important topic. We live in a particular moment of political instability. It's true for trade issues, and it's true as well for green investment. I'll be very humble in my insights. My name is Voiturier. Voiturier in English means parking valet, so I won't make a lecture. First of all, the green revolution is unfolding, something we couldn't have had imagined 5 years ago. The Paris climate change agreement outcome and main outcome is that there is a shift in the narrative and there is a shift in expectations. It's absolutely clear for the layman and for the businessman that we don't have a planet B, we don't have a plan B either. So the only plan A we've got is a plan A of a green or low carbon, low waste economy. So the question is not the direction, you were right saying that. The question is not the direction, but the pace when we get there. And what are the leading sectors and what are the laggard sectors where we need to combat resistance and where we need to provide support. Second point, the business is in the driving seat. There is a misunderstanding about this Paris climate change agreement. It's often presented as a success for intergovernmental negotiation. It's only half true, meaning that it's half wrong. Actually, what happened in Paris, December 2015, is that the politics at last caught up with the real economy. And the real economy was much greener and well ahead of the politics at this time. That means that now it's time for the public policy and the politics to make a step further in the coming years. Do we live in a brave new green world? We don't. It's true. If you look at two figures, 23 trillion, it's the amount of global assets which are worldwide under responsible management processes or mechanism. 23 trillions is brilliant. It's a 25% increase over the last 2 years. But it means also when the overall amount of assets managed worldwide is 450 trillion. So it's only 6%, meaning the bulk of assets worldwide are not managed under responsibility principles. A second figure, 13%. 13% is the ratio of power generated worldwide with renewable sources. This ratio doubled within the last 10 years. Great. But it means also that almost 90% worldwide is not sourced from renewable sources. So there is a bulk here of brown assets and brown energy sources. We can think about these two figures in two different ways. One is to say, well, the green revolution is not there yet, it's a long way, it will be terribly difficult. But the other perspective, and we should reverse the perspective, is to say, well, this amount of brown assets and overall investment, which is not actually green, let's say, put it like this, actually provide a proxy of what will be tomorrow green market. And it's huge. So the question then is how to get there. How to not only scratch the surface, but how to reach the 90% and shift the 90% asset at a very local level. And there are two, and this is where politics and trade come in. On politics, maybe I'll leave my neighbor talk about this a little bit. On trade, it's pretty clear that trade contributed over the last decade, and more importantly, over the last 5 years, to the lowering of the cost of the green product and services, and to spreading the best available technologies. Yet, what's going on, in particular in Europe, there was this non-paper issued by the Commission in July as to whether early mover countries when signing or negotiating trade deals, and in particular RTAs, regional trade deals, should use a carrot or stick approach to make trade greener. We're not clear about the conclusion of all this. What we have observed so far, and what is pretty clear, is that you need to export to pay for imports. Fine. It's the same for green products. You need to have green products, you need to have green export to pay for green imports. Otherwise, policymakers, in particular in Europe, will be tempted, will face a temptation to move to protectionist measures. I will stop there.
Okay, so I think it's a good stage setting, lots of questions in there. I want to go directly to Mr. Chen. So Mr. Chen, does what Tancred has said, does that also make sense with how you see the world? China Everbright has made environmental technology its business, its core business. How do you see that market evolving? Is it growing the way that he's described?
非常高兴来到美丽的布达佩拉，与大家共同探讨就是绿色发展这个全球人类共同关注的话题。
So first of all, thank you very much. We are from China, and we are really happy to see the Budapest, very beautiful city Budapest, and it's very honored to talk about the green business in here, which is involving all the human beings.
绿色是生命的象征，也是大自然的底色。
Well, green is representing the human being and also the nature of the color of nature.
就绿色发展而言，现在越来越成为全球大家全球共同关注的一个课题。因为现在全球各个国家已经形成了唇齿相依的共同体。
And well, right now, green is also quite, let's say, model to be studied from all over the world, and it's also very concerned for all the countries.
随着工业化的进程，还有城市化的推进，现在大气的雾霾，还有垃圾围城、水体污染、土壤沙化等等一系列问题的存在，地球的资源跟环境已经不堪重负。
So right now, because the industrialization in the world, there are quite a lot of place for pollution. For example, the air pollution, the water pollution, the soil pollution, which means the pollution, the resources in the world is also pushed to the limit.
在中国，人口众多，地域广阔，中国的资源也相对比较匮乏。还有自然灾害也多，因为在面临绿色发展的问题上，也是非常迫切。
So in China, everyone knows China has a very huge population, and we also have a large area, but the resource in China is quite unbalancing. So this is quite good study for Chinese people learn how to develop a green business.
这也形成了中国有巨大的绿色发展的市场，也有巨大的一个发展空间。
In the other word, in China, we have a huge potential market for green business.
以光大国际为例，我们2003年转型环保，14年时间，现在已经形成了。以环保投资、工程建设、运营管理、研发制造、研发设计、装备制造这样一个完整的环保体系。
So take Everbright as an example. We starting green business from 2003, and right now Everbright has involving investment, construction, research and developing, research and engineering, and also manufacture, which is the environmental basis for the whole system.
14年时间，我们在中国80多个城市已经拥有将近300个环保项目。
So during these 14 years, Everbright has acquired 300 projects over 80 cities in China.
这几年我们在节能环保的发展上，也涉及到，也在不断的走出去，在德国、波兰、越南、新加坡这些都逐步在开发我们的项目，已经形成我们的项目。
And during these years, we are also explore the business outside of China. For example, in Poland, in Germany, in Vietnam, and in Singapore, we also have some projects right now.
中国这个大的环保市场，在绿色发展上，为我们提供了很广阔的前景。
And in China, we have a really potential system to explore the green business.
我这里有一组数据，可以。与光大国际过去也是一家上市公司，现在我们已经拥有3家上市公司，6大业务板块。
So in China, the green business is growing really fast. For example, for Everbright, in 2003, we are only the list market in Hong Kong, but right now we have totally 3 list market company in Hong Kong.
14年时间，我们公司的总资产增长25倍。
The total asset is increasing 25 times.
销售收入增长超过100倍。
And the income is increasing over 100 times.
利润增长超过60倍。
And the profit is increasing 60 times.
我们3家上市公司的股价市值14年时间增长150倍。
And the total asset was increasing 150 times.
我觉得中国这个市场很大，但是在垃圾发电、在固废转能源方面，我们焚烧发电现在所占的比重在中国就是40%左右，还有60%的空间。
So far, talk about for example, the waste energy in China. Right now, there are only 40% of the waste energy has been, the project has been set up. There are about 60% of the project so far still under negotiation or something.
我相信在未来的10年甚至更长时间，中国在绿色发展这个领域上，还是绿色发展领域上，应该说前景是非常广阔的，特别在节能环保这一块，也还有10年甚至更长时间的一个发展空间。
So in the other word, in China, for the green business, especially for saving, increase the efficiency and have the clean emission goal, that in China over 10 years, we still think it will increase really fast, even above 10 years.
Okay.
全球固废主席、全球固废协会主席，还有美国哥伦比亚大学的教授德米吕斯先生到中国去看了我们项目以后，他谈到未来固废变能源未来的发展希望在中国。
Well, we give one example that the chairman of the International Solid Waste Association, Professor Thermalis from Columbia University, has been to China to see the waste energy project, and he mentioned that the future of the waste energy is in China.
联合国 PPP 中心主任汉密尔顿先生到我们南京项目参观以后，他谈到，他说这是他看到的最好的项目，希望中国，希望我们把在垃圾发电 领域的技术、管理还有经验向发展中国家推进。
And also we quote another person from UNECE, Mr. Jeffrey Hamilton. He also went to our project and say this is the most beautiful project he ever see. He want the Chinese people explore their management and technology to outside of China.
Fantastic.
谢谢。
Thank you very much.
So I think this is also a good setting of the stage. So this is an example of how the private sector is taking on this responsibility, as Tancred had said. I think it's a good time to bring you in, Marcel, to talk about why the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands has a Sustainable Development Department. Why is it important, and what are you doing to promote sustainability and green development?
Yes, well, we believe that business is crucial for sustainable development. Of course, you need sound environmental and social policies, but for structural solutions, you need the private sector to work with you. If you look at developing countries, for example, the amount of foreign income these days is basically driven by foreign direct investments. Official development assistance is still important, but less important than foreign direct investments. And also we're seeing more and more companies are looking into how they can contribute to the sustainable development goals. So for us that's the starting point, and as a government we very much would like to work with those companies. Well, we follow a sort of a triple approach in general. First, we support global alliances to realize the sustainable development goals in specific areas where we as the Netherlands have something to add, for example in agriculture, in water management, but also in specific value chains like the cocoa sector, which was already mentioned also this morning, and in the textile sector, for example. So this is the critical work to global alliances to really move into massive changes. Secondly, we will continue to support developing economies, and we work together with those countries, but more in a combined agenda of aid, trade and investment. So we really try to bring the trade world and the development cooperation world into one coherent agenda, which of course should be driven by the developing economies themselves in our cooperation. And finally, we would very much like to do our own work and make sure that we in the Netherlands move towards 100% sustainable consumption and production. Well, there's a bit of a tradition in my country on sustainability. As you are aware, perhaps we are a small country, densely populated, and very close to the sea. A large part of the land is below sea level. So we've always been confronted with the need for sound water management, which directly links to the issue of climate change, of course, because we will be one of the countries severely affected by the rise of the sea level and in the influx of water. So there's a very high awareness in our country on the importance of sustainability. We've achieved good results. I would say we are very good in cycling, and we're also very good in recycling. So these are success areas. And funny, I picked up some figures which are quite remarkable to your assets, but are about sustainable consumption in the Netherlands. Last year, the total market for sustainable certified products in the Netherlands has increased 25%, so you see the same boom. But the market share is 10% at the moment, which is quite substantive. It's 3.8 billion euro. So this is this double notion. It's speeding up quickly. At the same time, 10%, is that big? Is that small? Like you said, there's a huge potential for the other 90% to be picked up. At the same time, of course, we will have to continue work hard on some issues. To be frank, sustainable energy at the moment is 6% in the Netherlands, so we've set clear targets to increase that to 16% in 2023, but we are still heavily relying on oil and gas. Finally, perhaps also to look a bit in how we then approach the private sector. Like I said, we start with a positive notion. We would like to build upon the energy that is there in the private sector, where at the same time, as policymakers, we're not naive. So we have a threefold approach. The first one is that we very much support frontrunners, those who take the first steps, those who are innovative. We provide them with financial support, we guide them through the process. Often these are SMEs, like also in the previous panel was discussed. A good example, for example, is that we have been able to catalyze 200 million euros in private climate finance with this mechanism. The second one is that we would like to see mainstream solutions coming up, and for that we facilitate public-private partnerships. You really have to cooperate between government, civil society, the private sector, and also science. A good example, for example, is that we have the Sustainable Trade Initiative, which works together with mainstream producers. We have been able to reach the cotton sector. The Better Cotton Initiative was launched. Now 12% of the world market is under that certificate. And also in the cocoa sector, we've set similar targets. And the last approach is very much that you have to be very clear that you prevent and end illegal practices. That is critical to us. In all our cooperation with companies, let alone if we finance companies, we expect them to adhere to responsible business. We use the OECD guidelines, IFC performance standards, and also again we support developing economies in this respect. For example, we work together with the International Labour Organization in the Better Work initiatives, trying to bring up the standards and labour conditions in the textile sectors worldwide.
Great, thanks, Marcel. So that's, I think you've also given us now a kind of a context from the public sector standpoint, how to approach the problem holistically. So we've heard also a little bit about how the business model has worked for China Everbright. I want to come to you, Brendusa, and talk to you about whether the financial industry has changed, whether investment has changed. We hear huge numbers about impact investing. It's that it's $21 trillion and so on. Do you think that the investment industry has really recognized the importance of this? Is sustainability, is green driving the way that finance is moving? And if not, how not?
I think it is a real challenge to actually get the numbers right in this domain. Right? I think the 20 trillion refers to assets under responsible investment. If you think about impact investment, the best estimates that we know that are collected by the Global Impact Investment Network go up to 77 billion. Then you add to that different commitments that are made by institutional financial organizations, by private sector and so on, guesstimate takes you to 200 billion. And just to put that in context, last month the UN Secretary General was saying in New York that we would need, so these are updated numbers, we would need to realize the Sustainable Development Goals, we would need something between $3 and $5 trillion a year to get there. Okay, so we're at 200 billion in total in the impact space, and if you look at GIN, the best they can look in terms of asset management, they can see about 50 to 20 billion being added every year. So we're nowhere near in terms of money being there. And yet we have a lot of commitments towards this and a lot of goodwill. And public sector is engaging in public-private, and public sector is engaging in de-risking and co-investing and so on. So why isn't this happening? The market potential, and your question is, I think, a double-edged sword. The market potential can be counted on both sides. You can count it on the investment side, but you can then count it on the investment opportunity side. And that's the work that we're looking at the Ground Up project. How do we create a larger deal flow that is available to invest in? One of the biggest challenges that we see investors come up with is that they don't find enough good opportunities to invest in, and that there isn't a solid track record in the industry. And it's a chicken and the egg. Unless you actually create more deal flow and create the track record, then they won't come. So, where does one start? We have seen at least 1,000 entrepreneurs so far. We pre-qualified dozens and dozens of them, and we offer them to some that are close to being ready. We offer them personalized introductions to investors where we think that there might be a match. We also try to help the ones that are not quite there to be prepared. And investment readiness actually is the buzzword, and I'd like to point to that. There is not enough education in the entrepreneurial space about how to prepare for investment. And from an investor standpoint, these deals appear as not being deals. right? You're looking at an entrepreneur who has a fantastic solution, an innovative technology. It's going to solve your food problem or your waste problem and so on and so forth, but it doesn't actually represent a deal yet. And just to give you a sense of some of the stories, we have recently introduced a company that had over 1,000 outlets in East Africa of solar home systems to an asset manager that is interested in this space. And the asset manager told us, we don't work under 50,000 of these solar home systems. Well, to get to that capacity, you're a long way. We have introduced a very big, and fingers crossed they're doing quite well in that relationship so far, a very large sort of franchise business that looks at water quality and water purification across Africa. And this 3 billion plus asset manager really liked the business because of the franchise model, and you can see how for a debt provider, owning the assets is a really interesting business opportunity. In the conversation, at some point, they needed to discuss the structure of the existing investment. And so the CEO had to look up the notes. It's a very small anecdotal evidence, and he did find the notes. But the one thing the investor picked up afterwards in the conversation was he had to look up his notes. And this is a brilliant business, by the way, and they are going to get funded because they are brilliant. What do we do about the rest? What do we do about the large mass of entrepreneurs that are coming? We see entrepreneurs coming out of accelerators and programs that do not know how to put their financials together. I have millions of other examples. I'm exaggerating, but I have lots of other examples and fun stories. To me, the point is as follows. There's a death valley between the market, which are the businesses, and investment. And it's not your typical death valley around seed funding where you make it or you tank. So that's not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is the approach between the two parties. The entrepreneurs are not speaking the investor language, and the investors do not have the capacity, time, inclination, and so on, or very few of them actually do. So there's something to be done there, I think, in terms of providing entrepreneurs with very clear, very tailored, spot-on investor readiness support. It's almost like a clinic. You go to the clinic and you ask for very specific support. But there's a role for public sector in that space, because as any death valley, it suffers from the what do we call this, the tragedy of the commons dilemma, right? So neither side actually is willing or able to actually engage in it. So there's a role, as a new role in my view, for public sector. We've seen public sector finance, co-invest, we've seen public-private, we've seen de-risking investments. I'm now saying that there is a new role for public sector in providing this investor readiness and helping through entrepreneurship through this death valley. And it's not only about scaling up the green market here, it's also about creating the jobs that we want and sort of switching the statistics that you were mentioning earlier.
Great. So I think that gives us a great segue to talk to you, Martin, because I think one of the issues in that Death Valley, which you describe, is that the business model also looks a little bit different. And Martin, I think Biopolis is a good example of how this business model is evolving, what this new model looks like in terms of what a circular economy does, how it gets paid, how it structures its projects. So I want to hear from you about your business model at Biopolis, how you put that together, and what the challenges you think may be in terms of financing and getting a business up and going.
Sure. Thank you. It's always good to be last on the panel, because I can tie into all the very important things that the fellow panelists told before me. So a little bit of really a background about our company. We are SME based in Budapest, developing technical solutions that fall into the domain of circular economy, and a few words on that in a moment. But we are operating on a global scale through partners, projects ranging from China to the Netherlands, the Middle East, and Japan. So pretty much all over the world. And to sort of a little background on what we mean under circular economy and why it is really important for the topic of this this panel is we see that there are some sustainability challenges that are often tackled in isolation. How do we reduce carbon footprint? How do we reduce energy use? How do we reduce certain kind of pollution? But for it to mean really be a business, I believe we need to see it from a systemic perspective and not just these separate solutions in isolation. So the idea of the circular economy is how do we transfer our whole economy and value chain and trade into a way that first of all tries to reduce resource use, and if that's not possible, reuse the existing resources and recycle whatever is possible. So we are having different kind of technologies for these recycling needs. Our most important one is a technology for water recycling, and what we are seeing is that there are several drivers towards adopting these technologies and circular economy concept and solutions, like policy. But what we see is most importantly until for a given organization or municipality, the adopting a given solution makes financial sense, so somehow contributes to their bottom line. It's often very hard, practically impossible sell to make. And of course, this trickles down to what Brindusa said, that until there is a market, obviously these innovative companies are not able to make that volume of business that would make them a good target for private equity investment. So it's certainly a challenging transition, and I don't have the really answer to that, how it can be made, but I can just add a few insights on how we are trying to sort of tap into these changes. And what we realize is that first, as I said, all these solutions only work if they are adopt a holistic approach and try to bring together different technologies, different stakeholders, and also because we are talking about initiating a change, and change always means change of behavior, change of current practices. It by definition has a cultural aspect to it. So what we realized is that it simply doesn't work that I'm manufacturing something or coming up with a technology and I go anywhere in the world and just drop it and it will work. And it's true for the really the low-tech businesses, like very simple wells in African villages, to the really high-tech stuff. Is that for adoption you need to just the whole thing to tie into the local culture, and that's exactly the reason why we are always operating through local partners. And I think that's a key, that in our globalized world we really build this network of expertise and local presence to drive adoption of these technologies, and I think that will eventually bring together the financial part also.
I think that's a really important point, and I want to come back to Mr. Chen here to talk about. I know that Mr. Chen, you've been working with UNECE, the Economic Commission for Europe, specifically on public-private partnership models. So I wanted to hear about that work and about how those partnership models can help us fill this gap.
目前我们在中国的80多个城市的项目都采用 PPP 方式，都采用的 PPP 方式。
So far, all the projects for Everbright using PPP model.
我觉得 PPP 方式的采用有几个功能。第一是它的融资功能，通过社会资本的介入，减少政府一次性的对公共设施、公共领域急需的项目，减少政府一次性的过大投资。
So first of all, we think the PPP model have such an advantage. The first one is basically they will help the government to getting funding to help the government to help the government to increase to build the public infrastructures.
第二是授予政府、授予社会资本特许经营权，实际是3个权利，一个是在一定时期内，20年、30年内授予他的对项目的所有权、经营权，还有一个就是收益权。
So the second is basically the public sector, the private sector will negotiate with the government to have the franchising right. So basically, the private sector will have the ownership of the project, the management right, also the let's say the benefit right.
这样把政府要一次性投资的，把它分散到了20年、30年。 若干年以后来逐步支付。
So basically, this will decrease the investment from the government from 1 year to maybe extend to 20 to 30 years during this contract to lower the government's cost.
第三个，社会资本的介入，分散了政府独自投资的风险。
And the third advantage is to lower the risk from the government.
第四个，我觉得也是非常关键的一个，也就是政府给社会资本之间有一个很好的界定，在由社会资本通过社会资本的参与，社会资本管理项目，承担风险，还有按政府的要求。 来达到实现达标排放。
So we think the fourth one is the most important one because the private sector will be responsible helping the government to treat for example, the waste and also increase the efficiency of the management. That's quite important.
这样把社会资本的经营管理给政府的监督两者分离了。 分开了。
So basically, this will separate the management of the project and also between management of the project and supervision of the project.
Thank you.
Great. So I think that there's something there in terms of evolving business models. I want to ask Tancred so quickly now because then I want to get at least 1 or 2 questions from the audience on the global funding gap, and then I want to come to you, Marcel, on this question of SMEs. What do we need to do to help the smaller companies? Because often these PPPs are bigger company driven. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, on the funding gap, we're not 100% clear, it's guesstimates. We had this broad Agenda 2030 with a long list of sustainable development goals, and if you consider these 17 sustainable development goals, which provide an overview, an idea of what countries agree on, it's estimated 3-4 trillions a year in terms of investment, to compare with 150 billion official development assistance, which means that we need private investment to bridge the gap. That's obvious for anyone. How to work, how to channel this private investment? There are basically three ways, and I'll stop there. At the European level, I'm more familiar with. The first one, propelled and put forward by Juncker, is to say, well, we need to improve and to supply first loss guarantees to private investors. It's true for their external investment plan of the EU. It's true as well for internal investment plan. There are some drawbacks with providing first loss guarantees, because an investor would say, well, if a project is not profitable, it won't become profitable with a guarantee. The other way is to say we need to increase the return of all this investment and to pay for the social and environmental benefits. And there we need tax exemptions. We need to revise the tax system to reward these social benefits. It's another stream. And the last one is to work more on the demand side and to increase the number of and the pipeline of bankable projects, and to work as well on providing small tickets. Someone said that there are large tickets around. Investors want a large ticket because there is a transaction cost to strike a deal, while most of projects are a small size, and we need there some to fine-tune what should be offered to SMEs. And the last word on the Death Valley, I fully agree with what you said, and this is particular Death Valley. There are many incentives and subsidies or schemes to start a business. In most countries, to start a green business, you have incentives. But after 2 or 3 years, it stops all of a sudden, and then you face either a growth crisis or a liquidity constraint, because all of a sudden you have to pay charges and so on. And there is here clearly a Death Valley. And when you're a big player, like a power supplier in France, I won't give a name, you can knock the door of the Ministry of Finance and say, well, hey guy, I need a tax rebate, and you get your tax rebate. When you're small SMEs, forget about it.
Marcel,
yeah,
let me bring you in on the SME question.
Yeah, I think it's very complicated for a small company. If you look at the full package of the Sustainable Development Goals, I don't know them by heart myself. You know, it's a lot. So I agree with you that we need integrated solutions, like moving into the circular economy. At the same time, for an individual company, that is a huge challenge, of course. Some of the sectors in the Netherlands are moving into an integrated approach, like the Dutch dairy sector, for example. They have committed to become energy neutral in 2020. So they're working on that, including SMEs. So there's a lot of mentoring within the sector as such. There's one big company and a lot of small companies, and the farmers not to forget. So that's really an example of an integrated approach. But for many SMEs, they are lobbied in all directions, at least in my country, including our support to SMEs in other countries. It's about gender, it's about climate, it's about child labor. So they're pushed in all directions, and for them it's sometimes very difficult to say, okay, what am I doing? And this is both the business model and also the conditions attached to the business. So again, I think you need a lot of mentoring. We've heard good examples in the dialogue on sheet trade, and earlier also in the agribusiness dialogue today. We have the models of collectively guiding those companies towards maturity and making a decision also what kind of topics they would like to specialize. But I very much agree with Brendusa that then there's a huge gap towards financing. More and more, we also support a lot of initiatives with, for example, the Dutch Development Bank, FMO, but also the international banks on making money available to move into risks. At the same time, the banking sector is also bound by very severe international conditions these days, so there's a dilemma there. But I very much agree with you that we should continue to invest in particular for SMEs to make them aware of what is needed to table a sound investment plan, and on the other side also to make the financial investment sector even more responsive to the needs of SMEs, not of companies, but of SMEs. And sometimes, well, just take some risk, eh? So it's, things go wrong. We know the figures of dropouts, etc. Is that a reason not to invest? So a bit more courage also in the financial sector would be helpful.
Okay, I want to open it up to questions now. We need to hear again from Brendusa and Martin, but I want to see if there's, I can take, I think, 2 questions, 2 or 3, nice, concise questions that are going to give us the secret to everything, can be asked briefly and answered briefly. Big challenge here. Anybody in the audience with a question here? While you're thinking, let me come back to you, Brendusa. You talked about the concept of investment readiness, which really gets to this heart of how do we work with SMEs to help them, respond to the demand in the market for green. So what is this, what does this kind of thing look like? And then Martin, I'm going to come to you to talk about it from your standpoint of being a small company.
So I think, just taking a step back, we're looking here at a wholesale problem and a retail problem, if I can borrow these terms from the business world, right? The wholesale problem is we want our societies to change, and we want to bring in innovation at scale in food and education and waste and electricity and so on. We want that to happen. We want to create jobs at the same time, and we're talking a lot about innovation. A lot of the innovation, I would say overwhelmingly today, originates from Europe, US, and so on. But it is deployed in developing countries. So we still have a huge gap, I think, if we want to provide the solutions that are needed in the developing world, as well as in Europe and the US and other emerging economies. So that's the wholesale scenario, right? We have the innovation, we have the power, we need to accelerate that. The retail problem, I'd say, is when it comes down to each individual entrepreneur signing on the bottom line with an investor. And at that moment, this is, there's part of the scenario that happens there that has to do with the overall economic conditions in the country. There's part of it that has to do with industry standards and how well the industry is doing. But there's a lot of it that has to do with how much that investor is familiar with the sector, with the green or the social innovation that's on the table, how many of these they have seen before. It has to do with how their own investment strategy matches this. Do I have a box to tick somewhere? Do I understand the risks related to this business? And then on the entrepreneur side, it relates to, do I know how to present my numbers to this investor? Do I know what I'm asking from them? Do I even know to start with whether I should go for equity or debt? What's the best solution for me? And it comes down to that level, right? At that level, and it's the reason we started the Ground Up project, there is a certain amount of standardization that can be done. There are certain things that are not miracles. Investors are coming up with things that are repeatable across asset classes and across investors around the world. I'd say maybe 70 to 80% of their criteria can be standardized. The rest really comes down to being able to offer to the entrepreneur a service of preparation on their business model. So we have, for example, entrepreneurs who say, just recently there was one who has a fantastic idea and a fantastic product to a smart meter for water infrastructure in developing countries. He needs help with the revision of that business model, from someone who either is in smart meters or has done work in water infrastructure in developing countries. It comes down to this kind of detail, right? So it's help with their business model, it's help with their financials, it's help with their presentation and their pitch. But none of these things obviously are a substitute for that business becoming performant and actually the business model working. And that's the rest of the story. Just maybe one last thing to add to that. We talk a lot about de-risking and why should public money de-risk something that is potentially not a viable business. I think actually working on the business level might address quite a big part of this concern.
From the other end. Martin, you're running a small business. So tell us a little bit about what you think. You're in green markets. What do you think the solution is? What kind of support do SMEs need? from your standpoint?
Well, I think one of, besides obviously the financial support, one which is can be very helpful is when public bodies drive the adoption of new technologies and sort of take on some of the burden of trying out new things. And there are, in case of innovative small companies, usually there's this double sort of hurdle of going to the market. One is that they are small, so they don't have the financial clout to even sometimes to bid for projects. And of course, because it is something innovative, by definition it's new, it doesn't have that kind of track record that is often required, especially in public procurement. And we see some improvement in this area, like the EU is now developing this PCP, pre-commercial procurement process, although I don't see it yet adapted to green technologies, but at least the framework is there. But in terms of helping SMEs and policy making, I think tackling this, adopting technologies from smaller companies by the public sector or by some kind of cooperation of larger enterprises and the public sector would give that boost to this sector that's much needed.
Thank you. So I think we're coming around to the end here. We need to try to come back on schedule. I wanted to come back to each one of you for a last thought, a takeaway in terms of how we can support business taking on the demand for green. And I want to start with you, Mr. Chen. Give us a last thought here, a takeaway for the audience on this subject.
让我们携手并进，砥砺前行，为推进绿色发展，共创美好未来而努力。
So let's hold hands together and work hard together to contribute to the green business and the sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Brindusa, can I come to you for also a final takeaway for the audience?
Sure, I really very much appreciate that because I think it's in the spirit of working together to create scale. And we need to continue to work together across the public sector and the private sector to do that. I'd say, coming back to my initial point of the two sides of the market, to create a market. One is on the investment side. I think we see a lot more financial instruments that are being developed, and that for me is a positive sign. We see a lot more investors that are driven either by acknowledging that there is risk coming up and natural risk, and whether it's from climate or water or other of the big challenges that we're trying to address. So either they're driven by risk or they actually are really driven at heart by a desire to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So those two things, mission driven, I think for me are positive. One other thing positive on the investment side to leave you with is that of the small amounts that are being accounted for now by GIIN, 50+%, I think it's 59% actually, of investments, of assets, of investments that were made are actually at risk-adjusted market return. And so it is good. This is a good opportunity, exactly, to make money for those who have identified it. It's still 60%, so it can be better, but it is there. On the entrepreneur side, I think we see a lot of potential in working in partnership, and we are already working in partnership with the ITC, the She Trades program, looking at how to provide investor readiness to women-led businesses. We talked about that in the earlier session. But we're also working in partnerships with other international organizations, the UNFCCC and WIPO and others, networks of entrepreneurs where we can actually create scale by addressing those entrepreneur by entrepreneur challenges, and the technology is helping us. The platform of the Ground Up project is the base for creating this scale. So I see a lot of positive points coming forward.
Okay, check. We can see some positive things. Martin, tell us from your standpoint, what's a takeaway for this audience in terms of how business can respond to this demand?
And I'm sorry if I sound like repeating myself, but I think this is really a crucial point that I wanted to make, is that, as you also said, there are many drivers in adoption of sustainable technologies, like the inherent need to conduct a more sustainable business, and also the fear of some kind of negative outcome from not being sustainable. But I think in order to achieve widespread adoption and growth in this sector, we need to find those opportunities where they are giving an immediate financial benefit to the company or
so very short paybacks.
Very short paybacks.
With a contribution to the bottom line.
And I think there are many such technologies already on the market. So probably some kind of advocacy is also required, so people are aware of these. But in terms of tackling this, I think that should be the low-hanging fruit, because that would be an easy sell. If it makes
and may generate that critical mass that produces.
Yes, exactly.
Marcel, can I hand it to you from Dutch standpoint?
Yeah, I think we need solutions which are becoming mainstream, and therefore you need the big companies to move, and they should bring sustainability into their core business, and many are doing so. At the same time, they have to respond to ever-growing pressures from consumers and citizens. At the same time, in the end, for big companies, it isn't that difficult. You know, they are big, they have their assets, they have their advisors, they can hire consultants, etc. So we shouldn't forget the small companies. You see, if you go to a supermarket, you'll find the certified products there on the shelves. Most retailers in Europe, for example, have certified their fish, their chocolate, and they're moving in that direction. Again, we need to put them under pressure, also as government and as consumers and citizens. But we're convinced that movement will continue. So we have to be careful not to isolate the smaller companies, which by default are confronted with yet another set of conditions, in this term on sustainability. Of course, there are market opportunities for small companies as well, but for many of the other companies, these will be another set of conditions entering upon markets. So we need to support those small companies, and I very much echo what you said, that for the innovation that we so desperately need in sustainability, we also have to work with startups, with small companies, because big companies are not so good in innovating. That comes from smaller companies.
Thanks. Tancred, let me give you the last word.
Thank you very much for a very exciting conversation. Two takeaways. According to me, the government is not on the driver's seat, but on the passenger seat. Yet it can provide guidance and first of all, deliver on the 2015 commitments, meaning first of all, and to start with, to align the tax system, the incentive and support schemes existing so far with the objectives set up in Paris and beforehand in New York on the SDGs. You cannot call for a green economy and in the same time use a kind of fiscal and taxation system inherited from the 20th century. It's impossible. So we have to level a playing field for the green business. Second, we are in a self-fulfilling prophecy game. If you bet on the green, there will be green. So we all have to massively admit it, which make it kind of fragile, but this is a self-fulfilling game.
Take a leap of faith.
Yeah, exactly. Paris 2015 was the same on trust. It was really self-fulfilling, and it did work. So we're still there, and we have to keep on that way. And I think, and I pay you my shirt, or I pay you a drink. How many are you? 120. Yeah. Okay, I pay you a drink that within 2 years' time for the WEDF 2019, the green slot won't be a slot, it will be the reverse as today. There will be 1 day and a half on the green economy and one small slot on the brown conventional economy. So meet you there.
So we'll hold you accountable for that one. One very last word, Brendusa, and then we need to segue to a happy announcement that we want to make with Marcel and with Sierra Leone.
Unrelated to what we've just discussed so far, I just wanted to thank the organizers and the ITC. Related to what we were discussing earlier, I have come here today with my daughter, and my baby daughter couldn't have, I couldn't have traveled unless the organizers had made that possible for me. So if there are any women entrepreneurs out there who are hesitating to travel to conferences or actually work in public, then you should know that this conference has made it possible for me, so thank you.
Hear, hear. Thank you very much.